Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham will have a tough decision ahead as she looks down the list of legislation that didn't make it through the regular session. Let's welcome back to our Line Opinion panelists to dig through it all and the impact this will have moving deeper into this election year. Let's start with the Voting Rights Act, which ran out of time when Farmington Senator Bill Scherer filibustered the last 2 hours of the session. Now, the House approved the new version of the original proposal as part of an amendment on a related bill, but in the end, it wasn't enough time. Now, could supporters have done anything different, Algernon, to get this thing done? Was there something in hindsight that could have been different here?
Boy, I'm not sure. And again, not to be a broken record, but I think one thing that you're up against is just the limits of time. And the limits of time can be weaponized by either of the parties, the majority or the minority.
That's right.
And so that's the thing. That's the wall that advocates just find themselves hammering their heads against over and over. So I'm not really sure. The only thing also is just that, on the theme of time is just to really try to get the bills solidly written, because some of our committee chairs do like to work on legislation and really try to get into the weeds and the nuts and bolts of it, and that can add time to the committee process. And so if there's a way to really get some Brooklyn Bridge size bolts into your legislation so that it doesn't get weighed down by technicalities, I think that's one thing, but the politics are hard to move on this just because of the structure of the process.
Chip, on this Voting Rights Act, Maggie Toulouse-Oliver comes out with a victory. For the governor, how big of a deal for progressive voters might this be?
This is an extraordinary kind of larger issue. To Algernon's point, it would have been really smart, I think, in the interim to really build a consensus on this thing and get some bill that would have come out in the first or second week and then tried to push it through if they had wanted to do this. They did want it. Generally, expanding access to voting, which is what this bill would have done, writ large, generally helps Democrats. And that's when Republicans were using the call of the Senate, these procedural moves, frankly. And Greg Brandt from Rio Rancho used that effectively in the Senate to really bottle up the voting rights legislation, because access to voting has always been a big deal between the parties. And so I think in New Mexico, this is not like another state where, it's going to be interesting to watch the gubernatorial election and some of the other elections, but is this something that will deeply affect the elections and how the Democrats do versus the Republicans? I don't know, but it's not like we're living in Georgia or Kansas or someplace like that. So it's very interesting.
Interesting. I should be a little more clear. I mentioned it's a victory for Maggie Toulouse-Oliver. Just getting it, to Algernon's point, getting it to a certain place, if not over the finish line, just getting it to a certain place could be considered a victory, Julia. But do you expect this to come up again in the next 60-day session? Is this going to be a big push for these folks who really want to see this happening?
I can only view this bill in the shadow of the 2020 election and with the horizon of the 2024 election. I think voter rights is so politicized, and it's almost just code for talking about everything that's happened on the national stage. So I agree with both Algernon and Tripp. I don't think this was ever going to get through. I think it could have said nothing other than we need to dust the voting machines on a regular basis, and it would have been held up simply for the fact of it being a voter rights bill being proposed by Democrats within this larger context.
Good point there. In terms of priorities for the governor, guys, we got to talk about this. Hydrogen was also at the top of the list. Very noisy, very loud. We saw several similar pieces of legislation surface before being struck down, one after the other. Now, first, will the governor call a special session on this? I'm going to start with Algernon. And second, will the outcome be any different in your view?
It's a fair question. It's the day of the Sine Die. The session is just ended, and there are calls to start a special session. And the governor did do that to get cannabis over the finish line.
That's right.
Last year. I don't know if this is going to rise to a level. The Secretary of State issued a statement that didn't sound like she was anticipating the governor might do something like that. We will see if this is something that rises to where we need to get a special session to get at least some of this done, maybe some of the protections for election workers, maybe some of the election security changes that they think that they can get enough votes on board. But it's going to be hard. And, as Julia says, I think that there's probably sort of a baked in resistance that would not prevent Republicans from using procedural moves to delay its progress again.
Yeah, good point there. Hey, Tripp, this hydrogen issue, I got to stay with this thing. Is it exposing a rift between Democrats here? I mean, it's been a wedge issue within the party itself, and not the only one. How could so many bills fail with such an overwhelmingly Democratic majority here? You got to ask a simple question.
I mean, it really does expose this rift over folks, who wanted cleaner kind of, hydrogen versus using the natural gas and kind of not holding up, but benefiting the oil and gas, industry in New Mexico. There's a real deep conversation here. To the point of a special session that might involve a Hydrogen Hub Act, they haven't built a consensus on this.
Right.
In 2021, they were not talking about hydrogen. They were talking about climate change, but they weren't talking about Hydrogen Hub Act. This is coming from the federal government, and this is a way of, New Mexico trying to get something in law that might be able to compete for federal dollars, is how I understand it. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take some time for them to really work with a lot of critics who were coming from the left side on this stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was amazing how many folk turned out to say, this is not a good bill. We do not like this. So there's a lot of backroom kind of probably negotiating, and I don't think they brought the critics around from the on the left, the left of the Democratic Party. I say left of Michelle Lujan Grisham on this issue.
Mm-hmm. Julia, Speaker Egolf tabled it 3 times. I mean, something seemed disconnected here with this bill.
Well, yeah, and Tripp is absolutely right. It's the federal infrastructure bill, I believe, that has this built-in grant money that states can apply for. And so clearly this was this immediate attempt, let's set up this framework so that we can go get this money. But the problem, as Tripp has said, is every environmental organization in the state and the country has come out with very strong arguments against this as a form of energy. And these are normally, people who I think the governor is used to having in her camp.
Good point.
And there's certainly Brian Egolf's constituents. And so I just think it was a non-starter. There, unlike with cannabis, where so much of the groundwork had been laid and the objections that remained really were not based on much. And so they were able to push it through. This is one where the objections are pretty substantive. And I don't think the argument of, well, let's just get the framework so we can get the money is going to be very compelling to its critics.
That's right. It's sort of an old New Mexico way of doing things. Get the Fed money first and figure it out. Interesting. I want to talk about how we do these things in dummy bills and, the machinations of, changing pretrial detention standards, making it official. Should the legislators have seen the potential constitutional issues earlier on some of these things? Something just doesn't seem connected here. Tripp, let me start with you on that one. So, how we're doing this, basically. This is a great frustration I get from people all the time. They look at a 30 and they say, there's no way we're going to get all these things in here. No wonder we're playing all these games that makes the public sort of lose faith here. Is that part of the problem here, all these machinations that the public's finding out about sometimes?
I mean, honestly, these games and maneuvers are going to be in every legislature across the nation and in Congress. I mean, there's a certain amount of procedural moves, intricacies that, one can use. I mean, the old adage is whoever understands the process is going to have power in a legislature, and that's true. As far as the dummy bills, not surprised at all, even though the Senate several years ago came out and said, we're not going to use these like we used to anymore. We're going to try to use them as in emergencies. The question around some of these dummy bills, especially around the Hydrogen Hub Act, was, is this an emergency? So, the public needs to understand that there's always going to be conversations in the back room and people having to compromise on something over, on something that their constituents might not like. At the same time, this might might bolster the conversation about a paid legislature, frankly. That's also part of a much larger conversation.
That's right. Let's talk about Brian Egolf. Can't hold off any longer. We just, news came out Thursday that he is resigning from his position as Speaker of the House. Algernon, let me talk with you. First of all, the obvious question is, was this a big surprise? Let's kind of get past that. Why? What do you suppose happened here?
Well, it does seem to have been a surprise to many members of the House, at the very least, and certainly to a lot of people observing it. Speaker Egolf seemed to be in a very powerful position, but also there's a lot of political pressure on him, ethics complaints that have repeatedly been filed against him to try to undermine his leadership, to dislodge him from his caucus. And he made this surprise announcement as the closing minutes were underway that he was going to spend more time with his family, which unfortunately mirrors the kind of joke that people say when people leave in a cloud of trouble. I don't know what the speaker has in mind or what is next for him, but right. It certainly came as a surprise to a lot of people today.
Tripp, were you surprised?
Oh yeah, totally. I was sitting here I'm working out of my house, and I texted my colleague, and her reaction, I can't say it on a family friendly show, my kind of reaction too. I will say this: if this were a regular session and not a pandemic session, it would have been harder probably to keep the secret, because there have been more people in the hallways milling around, and secrets don't stay. It's one of those things where there probably were not a lot of people, and he might have been able to, but to Algernon's point, I have no idea what this is about, but my head goes, well, what causes this? What's the precipitating factor or factors?
Right. Hey, Tripp, real quick, a favor before I get to moving on about Brian Egolf. We had an arrest of Georgene Lewis as well. Drunk driving arrest, as we know. How did that impact the calculus in Santa Fe? Did it come so late in the process it didn't matter? Or what happened there in your mind, if anything?
There's the public conversation on whether she should resign or not, because we've had other situations, with Richard Martinez and Monica Youngblood in the past.
Yep.
I had to cancel one of her committee hearings in a 30-day session, and this is in the last half of the session. I'm not saying that that's huge, but every committee hearing counts in a 30-day session. So as far as procedurally, I'm not sure, but I do think that there's going to be a public conversation around, one thing that I think about is it's unfortunate that this happens, but in the Roundhouse or any state house, there's a culture of, this is not about any one person, but there's an whining and dining of lawmakers.
That's right.
All this kind of stuff. What do you do with that kind of stuff?
That's a good point.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Julia, back to the point here. Sorry about that. For Speaker Egolf, you've covered him since day one. Were you surprised?
I was surprised, and I'm surprised by myself in the last few weeks. My cynicism guard seems to be down a little bit. I don't find it impossible to believe that Brian Egolf wants to spend more time with his family. Just having seen him over the years, he's pretty devoted to his daughters, and his wife is pretty busy with her business. I don't find it impossible to believe. I could probably be proven wrong by some horrendous scandal any minute, but I'm gonna believe him for now. That's true.
Anybody? Any predictions in the last 10 seconds on who the next speaker might be, by any chance? Julia, do you have a thought on that?
Not off the top of my head.
Javier Martinez was just elected majority leader. There's going to be a lot of jockeying. I don't know that he has a power base yet, but Tricia Lundstrom.
We shall see. That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks again to our online panel, our line panel specifically, as always. This week, now be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics the line covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages.